I don't remember exactly when I stopped recognizing the woman I married. But I do remember the feeling. It wasn't sudden, more like the faint hum of an engine that never turns off, one that starts in the background and grows louder the more you try to ignore it. Melissa and I had been married for 4 years. We met in college. I was studying business administration, she was in public relations. She had this kind of magnetic energy that made everyone in the room want to orbit her. Confident. Beautiful. Sharp as hell. The kind of woman who didn't need anyone, and yet, for a while, she chose me. That used to feel like a miracle. Now it felt like a trap. After the wedding, everything seemed fine. Maybe too fine, in hindsight. Melissa slipped so effortlessly into the role of wife that I didn't notice how rehearsed it all felt, how curated. She said the right things, kissed my cheek before work, texted hearts, called me, babe, in that soft voice that used to undo me. But it was all airless. Like a stage performance she'd already grown bored of. It started with little things. A distant look during dinner. A sharp sigh when I touched her shoulder in bed. The way her smile stopped reaching her eyes. She began going out more. Networking, she'd say. Client drinks, she'd add. And because I wasn't a suspicious man by nature, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. It's incredible the kind of logic you'll wrap around yourself like a blanket when the truth is too cold to face. She'd come home late, the smell of gin and citrus clinging to her, cheeks flushed in a way that had nothing to do with alcohol. Then she'd fall asleep before I could ask anything. Or maybe I stopped asking. I told myself I was being paranoid. That was my first mistake. The second was not noticing how quickly the attention stopped. No more. How was your day? No more jokes, shared glances, lazy weekend cuddles. But what I did notice were her mood swings. Some mornings she'd float around the kitchen humming to herself, making pancakes like a 1950s sitcom wife. Other days she wouldn't speak to me at all, just cold silence and distant stares. One night she went to a friend's birthday party, alone. I offered to come. She said it would be mostly girls. Bet she'd rather have a night to herself. I nodded. Smiled even. But something inside me twisted. A subtle, poisonous doubt that would not go away. When she left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the tail lights disappear down the street, my hand still resting on the curtain. I don't know how long I stood there. But I do know that was the night I realized I didn't trust her anymore. And that's when I made the call. My closest friend, Derek, worked in the same building as Melissa, different company, same floor. We'd been tight since high school. Played football together. Traveled. He'd been my best man. Trusted, blunt, and not afraid to tell me if I was losing my mind. I asked him to keep an eye out. Just, quietly. Nothing invasive, nothing that would tip her off. I needed to know if I was crazy, or if something real was happening behind my back. 2 days later, I had my answer. Derek called me from his office during lunch. I remember I was in the garage, trying to fix the damn leak under the sink for the 3rd time that week. She's not just acting different at home, he said. I've seen her talking to some guy outside the building. Tall. Clean cut. Drives a black Audi. He picks her up after work, and this isn't a one-time thing. My stomach went cold. I pressed the phone to my ear harder, like I could force the words to make sense. You're sure it's not just a client? I asked. God, I wanted it to be something professional. Something benign. Derek hesitated. Today he brought her flowers. Red ones. She smiled like I haven't seen her smile in years, man. That image broke something in me. A stranger making her smile in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not since our honeymoon. Not since she looked at me like I mattered. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. You okay? He finally asked. I lied. Yeah. That night I barely slept. I kept glancing at her phone as she slept beside me, screen down, always. A reflex I hadn't paid attention to before. The next night, after she fell asleep, I gave in. Her passcode was still the same, my birthday. The irony of that almost made me laugh. What I found wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. It was a goddamn explosion. Messages. Dozens of them. All from a contact named A, initials I assumed. The conversation stretched back weeks, maybe longer. It was all there. Intimate texts. Hotel confirmations. Private photos she never sent me. One thread was particularly brutal. He said he missed the feel of her skin. She replied she couldn't wait to see him again. Friday, same room? Same room. Like it was routine. I sat there in the glow of the screen, feeling like my lungs were folding in on themselves. She stirred in her sleep, murmured my name, like I was still hers. I turned off the phone. Got out of bed. Sat on the bathroom floor for over an hour just staring at the tiles. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Just silence. Cold, ringing silence. That night I packed her things. Every last piece. The next morning, I didn't say a word when she walked into the kitchen and saw the suitcase by the door. I didn't have to. I looked her in the eye, and for the first time in months, I saw something real in her face. Fear. I thought that once I knew the truth, once the veil was ripped away, I'd feel some kind of release. Like the pain would be sharper but cleaner. But the truth isn't sharp, it's heavy. It presses down on you until even breathing feels like labor. For the next 2 days, I lived like a ghost in my own house. Melissa carried on her routine as if nothing had changed. She brewed coffee in the mornings, sent me distracted smiles, tapped away on her laptop in the evenings. But I couldn't stop seeing her differently. Every movement of hers seemed rehearsed, like she was running out the clock in a play where I was the only audience member left. I kept replaying Derek's voice in my head. He brought her flowers. She smiled like I haven't seen in years. I couldn't scrub that image out. It burned more than the hotel messages, more than the photos. Because it wasn't just sex. It was joy. A joy she no longer reserved for me. I became hyper-aware of every sound in the house. The vibration of her phone at 11:37 p.m., muffled under a pillow. The click of her heels as she walked out the door. To meet a client? The muted laugh that leaked from the bathroom when she was supposedly scrolling through Instagram. Each sound was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Derek kept feeding me pieces. Not because I asked, because he knew I needed to hear it. She leaves work right at 5, he told me. Doesn't even say goodbye to the team anymore. He's always waiting at the curb. Same spot. Same car. I watched her once. She didn't even look around to see if anyone noticed. Just slid right in, like it was muscle memory. I started driving by her office after work, parking far enough away not to be seen. It was pathetic, I knew it. But I had to see for myself. And sure enough, there she was, stepping out into the evening air, her eyes scanning the sidewalk until they landed on the Audi. She walked faster then. Eager. She never walked that fast toward me. He opened her door. She laughed. She touched his arm before getting in. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap in my hands. The worst part wasn't watching her betray me. It was realizing how good she had become at it. The ease. The confidence. Like she had been practicing for this her whole life. When she came home that night, I pretended to be asleep on the couch. She tiptoed past me, her heels in her hand, careful not to wake me. As if she still cared about my rest, about my peace. The hypocrisy nearly choked me. I told myself I needed more. More proof. Not because I doubted, but because I wanted the weight of certainty to crush any foolish instinct to forgive. I didn't want to be my father, who looked the other way when my mother finally stopped loving him. I wanted the kind of proof that would make forgiveness impossible. The next night, when her phone lit up again at midnight, I picked it up. My hands didn't even shake this time. Another string of messages. Can't wait for tomorrow. Same hotel? I'll bring the champagne. Her reply, of course. Same room. You know what I like. I sat there, the glow of the screen painting my face, and felt something in me finally harden. There was no saving this. There was no version of reality where she was still my wife. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. I began planning. By the time Friday rolled around, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Melissa thought she was being clever, hiding in plain sight. She didn't even bother to change the passcode on her phone. The arrogance of that almost impressed me, like she believed I'd never have the nerve to check. Or maybe she thought I was too weak to face the truth. That night she got dressed with more care than usual. A silk blouse, perfume she hadn't worn in months. She left me on the couch, kissed me lightly on the forehead like I was a child she was tucking in, and walked out the door. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just listened as her heels clicked down the front steps and faded into the night. I already knew where she was going. I waited until midnight before I opened her phone again. The messages were there. His name wasn't even saved, just an initial. A. But the way she wrote to him, there was nothing casual about it. They weren't fumbling through some cheap fling. They had rhythm. They had practice. One photo stopped me cold. A mirror selfie in some hotel bathroom. Melissa in lingerie I'd never seen before. She wasn't smiling in the picture. She was beaming. That expression, wide, careless, alive, was something I hadn't seen in years. She hadn't looked at me that way since before we exchanged vows. It's strange how betrayal doesn't just stab you, it rots you from the inside. Sitting there, holding her phone, I felt something snap. But it wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was finality. I walked into our bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out her suitcase. I didn't pack neatly. I wasn't thoughtful. I tossed clothes in, shoes, the drawer of makeup she obsessed over. Every object that belonged to her was just another piece of dead weight I needed out of my house. Out of my life. It took less than an hour. By 2 a.m., her belongings were stacked neatly by the door, waiting like a silent verdict. I sat at the kitchen table after that, staring at nothing. My hands flat against the wood. My coffee mug from that morning still sitting there, a ring of dried brown at the bottom. The house was quiet, except for the tick of the clock. It was the kind of silence that fills your ears until you think you'll go insane. When she finally came home, it was nearly dawn. I heard the car door, the soft scrape of her keys at the lock. She stepped inside, smelling of perfume and someone else's cologne. Her hair was mussed, her blouse untucked, but she carried herself like nothing was out of place. Then her eyes landed on the suitcase. I'll never forget that moment. The way her smile faltered, the way her face drained of color. She opened her mouth like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. Looked straight through her. And for the first time since this all began, she looked afraid. Melissa stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes darting from me to the suitcase like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. For once, she didn't have a script. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, my hands folded in front of me. The air between us felt thick, heavy, like the pause before a storm breaks. Finally, she found her voice. "What's this supposed to mean?" Her tone was sharp, defensive. That's when I knew she realized exactly what it meant. She just wanted to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. "It means you don't live here anymore," I said. My voice was steady. Too steady, even to my own ears. She blinked, as if I'd spoken another language. Then she laughed, short, brittle, completely out of place. "Are you serious? You're throwing me out? Over what?" I didn't answer. I just reached over, slid her phone across the table toward her. Screen lit. The thread of messages still open. Her face stared back at her from the photo she'd sent him, lingerie and all. Her hand shot out, snatched the phone. She locked the screen with a trembling thumb, as if that could undo what I'd seen. "You went through my phone?" she hissed. "That was it." Not "I'm sorry." Not "let me explain." just outraged that I had caught her. Yeah, I said flatly. And I saw everything. The texts. The photos. The hotel plans. Don't bother lying. Melissa's face shifted through a dozen expressions in seconds: shock, indignation, guilt, anger. Finally, she settled on defiance. You're overreacting, she snapped. It's not what you think. That line. That tired, pathetic line. My father had heard it from my mother once, years ago. And I remembered the hollow way he had believed it. I wasn't going to be him. I pushed my chair back, stood slowly. For a moment, we just stared at each other. You're done here, I said. Tomorrow morning you're gone. The lawyer will call you next week. We're finished. Her face cracked then, just a little. Her lip trembled, but she tried to cover it with anger. You can't just throw me away like this, she said, her voice rising. This is my house too. My life. You don't get to make that decision alone. I stepped closer, close enough to see the smudge of another man's cologne on her blouse. My voice dropped, quiet enough that she had to strain to hear me. You made that decision the moment you spread your legs for someone else. Her eyes widened. She wasn't used to me being cruel. She was used to me swallowing things, brushing them off, smoothing over cracks. But not this time. I picked up the suitcase, set it firmly by the front door. Then I turned the deadbolt behind her, slow and deliberate. You can sleep in the guest room tonight, I said. But when the sun comes up, you're gone. You'll leave with nothing. No house. No money. Nothing. Melissa's bravado broke then. Her chin wobbled, her eyes glassed over, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I walked past her, heading for the bedroom. For the first time in months, maybe years, my chest felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but free. Behind me, I heard her whisper my name. But it sounded small, foreign, like the voice of a stranger. And that's exactly what she was now. I barely slept that night. Not because of doubt. Doubt was gone, strangled by the mountain of evidence I dug through. No, I stayed awake because my body didn't know how to come down from the storm. My heart kept pounding in my chest, as if expecting her to burst into the bedroom and beg or scream or collapse into some grand confession. But she didn't. She stayed in the guest room. I could hear the faint shuffle of her pacing back and forth, the occasional muffled sob, the quiet creak of the mattress when she finally lay down. I stared at the ceiling until dawn leaked pale light across the walls. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, she was already there. Still in the same blouse, hair tangled, eyes swollen from crying. She looked less like the woman I married and more like a stranger caught in a crime she didn't know how to talk her way out of. Her suitcase sat by the door where I left it, an accusation that spoke louder than anything I could say. She tried first. You don't understand, she said, her voice raw. It wasn't about you. It wasn't about us. I poured myself a cup of coffee, ignoring the tremor in my hands. Then who the hell was it about? Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. She just shook her head and muttered, I don't know. I don't know. That was worse than a lie. She pushed her palms against the counter like she was bracing for impact. I made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. You can yell at me, hate me, punish me, but don't just throw away our marriage. Her words were frantic, rehearsed, desperate. But her eyes still carried the same glint of calculation. Like she was already rearranging the narrative in her head, deciding what story she'd tell our friends, our families. I shook my head slowly. There's nothing to fix. You didn't trip and fall into someone's bed. You built a second life. You lied, every day, while looking me in the eye. Her jaw clenched. So what? You're just going to toss me out? After everything? After everything, I repeated. Yes. She laughed then, bitter, hollow, teeth bared. You think you're punishing me? You're punishing yourself. You'll be alone, pathetic. And I cut her off with a raised hand. Don't finish that sentence. Don't you dare stand in my kitchen, wearing his cologne on your skin, and try to threaten me with what you'll become without me. Silence. Heavy. Final. She grabbed the suitcase handle then, knuckles white, and wheeled it toward the door. But she stopped halfway, turned to look at me one last time. Her eyes brimmed with something I couldn't quite read, anger, sadness, maybe both. You'll regret this, she whispered. I sipped my coffee, staring back at her without flinching. No, I said. I already regret marrying you. Her face cracked at that. Truly cracked. She blinked fast, like the words had pierced deeper than anything else I'd said. Then she left. The door clicked shut behind her. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was brutal. But it was mine. For the first time in a long time, it was mine. The first morning without her was both quieter and heavier than I expected. Her absence wasn't a relief right away. It was like walking into a house after a fire. The walls were still standing, but the smoke clung to everything. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the empty chair across from me. For years that chair had been hers, legs crossed, phone in hand, eyes glazed over with the distraction of 100 conversations I was never part of. Now it was just an empty space, but somehow it still carried her shape. I thought I'd feel victorious, having sent her out the door with nothing but a suitcase and the weight of her own betrayal. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like survival. Like dragging myself out of a wreck and realizing I'd lost more than I'd saved. The divorce papers were the easy part. My lawyer didn't waste time. Melissa tried to play victim at first, claimed I'd blindsided her, said we just needed space. But when her messages and photos came up, evidence printed out in black and white, her bravado crumbled. She didn't fight for alimony, didn't argue over the house. Maybe she thought clinging to me after what I'd seen would make her look even smaller. Or maybe she was just too busy running into the arms of her to bother. I didn't ask. I didn't care. What haunted me wasn't her infidelity anymore. It was the way I hadn't seen it coming. The way she had looked at me for months with practiced affection, while saving her real self for someone else. That was the part that gutted me, not the sex, not the lies, but the fact that I'd been living beside a stranger who had mastered the art of pretending. Friends asked me if I wanted revenge. Family asked if I was okay. I gave the same answer to both. I just want her gone. And I meant it. The nights were the hardest. Lying in bed alone, I'd replay the discovery over and over, the messages, the photos, the hotel reservations. Sometimes I'd get stuck on a single line she wrote to him, "You know what I like." 6 words that stabbed deeper than any confession could. Because they were intimate, casual, lived in. Words meant for him, never for me. But with time, days, then weeks, the weight started to lift. The house grew quieter, but cleaner. My meals were simpler, but mine. No more waiting up for her, no more scanning her face for signs of truth. Just silence, brutal but honest. One evening, Derek came over with a 6-pack. We sat in the backyard, the air cool, the crickets buzzing. He didn't say much, just clapped me on the shoulder and handed me a beer. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to gratitude. Not for Melissa, not for the wreck she left behind, but for the fact that I still had people who stood beside me when the foundation cracked. Melissa is gone now, not just from my house, but from my life. I don't follow her. I don't ask about her. She became a ghost the moment she chose another man. And me? I'm still here. Bruised, yes. Hollow in places I don't know if I'll ever fill again. But free. There's no ribbon to tie around this story, no lesson neatly packaged. The truth is simple, and it's ugly. She betrayed me, I let her go, and now I live with the silence she left behind. But that silence, for all its weight, is mine. And that, finally, is enough.